Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to guide you through tonight's journey. I know many of you use these videos to help you unwind or drift off to sleep. So before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind relax. It all started when Zoe began getting strange followers on her Instagram. At first, it seemed harmless enough. Random accounts with vague usernames that followed her photography page, where she posted moody landscapes, city shots, and snippets of her day-to-day life. One account in particular, called at Nightwatcher12, stood out. They didn't have any photos, followers, or posts, but they started liking her photos almost immediately after she posted them, even the old ones buried deep in her feed. Zoe shrugged it off as just another anonymous account. She had thousands of followers after all. A blank profile here or there wasn't unusual. But then, the DMS started. The first message was just a simple, "Hello," sent at exactly midnight. She ignored it. The second message, sent the next night at the same time, was longer. "You have such a lovely smile. I can see why everyone notices you." Zoe was a little creeped out but didn't respond. She hoped they'd get bored and go away, but they didn't. Every night, the messages came like clockwork, getting more personal and unnerving. Then one night, at Nightwatcher12 sent a picture. Zoe's breath caught as she opened it, recognizing her own street, captured from what looked like a car window. It was a blurry, hastily taken shot, but she could make out the familiar street signs and the dimly lit windows of her apartment building. Heart pounding, she typed back, "Who are you?" The reply was instant. "Closer than you think." She blocked the account immediately, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her phone was buzzing constantly, but she refused to look. The following day, Zoe told her friend and fellow photographer, Mark, about the messages. He laughed it off at first, telling her it was just some bored internet troll. But seeing the fear in her eyes, he agreed to help her figure it out. They scrolled through her blocked list, trying to trace any links between it, Nightwatcher12 and her other followers. Nothing stood out. That night, Mark came over to keep her company. They joked, watched movies, and almost managed to shake off the tension. But at midnight, her phone vibrated. She held her breath, seeing a new message request from a different account. At Eyes in the Dark 13, the message simply read, "I see you're not alone tonight." Zoe's blood ran cold. She showed Mark, who was just as freaked out as she was. He quickly blocked the new account, but it didn't stop. Just minutes later, another account messaged her, with a new name but the same profile picture, a black screen with two faintly glowing eyes in the center. This time, the message was more chilling. "You can't block me forever." They tried to ignore it, but the messages kept coming, each one more invasive than the last. Zoe turned her phone off, but even then, the paranoia wouldn't leave. She felt like someone was outside, just beyond the window, watching, waiting. The following morning, Zoe decided to take a break from Instagram altogether. She deleted the app, hoping it would give her some peace. But the messages didn't stop. Somehow they started appearing in her email, under anonymous addresses, each one darker than the last. They described her clothes, her daily routines, even what she'd had for breakfast. Days passed, and though she tried to carry on as usual, she could feel the weight of someone's eyes on her wherever she went. Then, one evening, as she was heading home, she noticed a black car parked across the street. She'd seen it before, but hadn't thought much of it. This time, though, she caught a glimpse of the driver, a figure wearing a black hoodie, their face hidden in shadow. Zoe hurried inside, locking the door behind her. She peeked through the curtains, only to see the driver raise their phone, snapping a picture of her window. Her phone vibrated. A new email. "I like your hair that way." She couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled as she tried to call Mark, but the line wouldn't connect. Instead, she got a text. "No one can help you now." Desperate, Zoe called the police, but with no concrete evidence, they couldn't do much. They suggested she keep her blinds closed and stay aware of her surroundings. Feeling helpless, Zoe closed herself off from the outside world, staying inside and keeping her lights off at night. But the emails kept coming, each one more sinister than the last. The messages started detailing moments she hadn't even posted about, like walking through her kitchen at midnight to get water, or the time she'd glanced nervously out her window. Each email signed off with the same words: "Closer than you think." One night, she heard a knock on her door. Heart racing, she peeked through the peephole, seeing nothing but darkness. Her phone vibrated again. This time, the message was a live photo of her front door taken from the hallway. Zoe backed away, heart pounding, and dialed 911. But before she could speak, a new email arrived. This one had a video attachment. Hands shaking, she opened it. The video was grainy and dark, as if taken through a security camera. It showed her asleep in her own bed, taken from inside her room. Frozen with terror, she glanced around, her eyes landing on the small ventilation grate above her closet. It was ajar, and she could swear she saw something shifting in the shadows behind it. The last message appeared on her screen, written in capital letters: "I told you, you can't block me." Zoe never touched her phone again. When her friends came looking for her, her apartment was empty. All that was left was her phone, lying on her bed, with the screen showing that final, chilling message. No one ever heard from Zoe again. To this day, no one knows what happened to her. But occasionally, a new Instagram account follows random users with vague names like @MidnightWatcher14 or @Eyes in the Dark. And if you get a message that says, "I'm closer than you think," you might want to look around. It started innocently enough. Mike, a high school teacher with a private Instagram account, began noticing a particular follower named @QuietEyes99. Unlike most of his followers, this account had no profile picture, no bio, and no posts. It was a blank slate, with only a small handful of other random people it followed. Mike thought it was odd, but dismissed it. Everyone gets random followers here and there, right? A few days later, @QuietEyes99 started liking Mike's older posts. Pictures from family gatherings, vacations, even mundane shots of his cat sleeping on the couch. But things took a strange turn when he received his first message from them. "Your cat is cute. She looks happy in her favorite spot." A chill went down Mike's spine. He'd never posted about that specific spot, but it was true. His cat had a particular spot by the living room window where she loved to curl up, basking in the sunlight. He brushed it off, though, thinking it was a lucky guess or a coincidence. But later that evening, as he was getting ready to sleep, another message arrived. "Good night, Mike. Hope you sleep well." A knot of dread formed in his stomach. How did this person know his name? His account was private, and he hadn't accepted any new requests recently. He double-checked his settings and blocked @QuietEyes99, feeling a wave of relief as he put his phone away, sure it was over. But the relief was short-lived. The following day, Mike received a message from a new account, @WatchingYou101. It was the same blank profile, the same unnerving silence, except for the single message: "Blocking won't help." Over the next few days, Mike tried to ignore the growing number of messages. Each time he blocked one account, another would appear, each with a similar eerie username. Every night he would receive a message around the same time, right before bed, with updates on what he'd been doing during the day. "Nice coffee run this morning. Black with 1 sugar, right?" Or, "Looked like a fun night out with friends." He stopped posting entirely, hoping that would make them lose interest. But the messages didn't stop. Instead, they became more detailed, describing things he hadn't posted, like the color of his shirt or the specific park he had jogged through. One night, while he was washing dishes, his phone buzzed again. He opened the message, dreading what he'd see. Careful not to break that plate. He froze, feeling watched, but when he looked out his window, he saw nothing, just the quiet, empty street below. Mike went to the police, showing them the messages, but there was little they could do. No real threats, they said, just someone being creepy online. They suggested he deactivate his social media and change his phone number, so he did, hoping it would give him some peace. But the silence didn't last long. Just a few days after deactivating his account, he got a text from an unknown number. "Miss me, I'm still here." He deleted the message, blocked the number, and tried to calm down. But every day more texts came. They became bolder, more chilling. One evening, he got a message that simply said, "Look outside." He didn't want to, but something compelled him to peek out his window. And there, across the street, a figure stood in the shadows, a silhouette under a streetlight. He couldn't make out a face or any features, but he just knew, that it was them. His silent observer. The figure didn't move. It just watched, standing perfectly still until Mike shut his blinds, heart racing. The messages didn't stop. Every night, he got a new text, each one shorter, each one making it clear that this person was getting closer. "You're making this so hard, Mike. Don't you want to see me?" One night, he awoke to the sound of a faint tapping on his window. He lay in bed, heart pounding, paralyzed with fear. His phone buzzed beside him, and with shaking hands, he unlocked it. The message was a video this time. He tapped it, and the screen went dark for a moment before he realized it was a live feed of his bedroom window, the very window next to his bed. He could see himself lying there, watching as the figure outside raised a hand, tapping once more on the glass. Panicked, he bolted out of bed, ran to the door, and fled into the night. He didn't look back. To this day, Mike hasn't returned to his apartment. He changed cities, got a new job, and has tried to move on. But sometimes when he checks his new phone, he sees a message from an unknown number. Just a simple message like, "I'm still here," or "nice haircut." He can't block them. He can't escape them. And every time he glances at a window, he wonders if tonight's the night they'll find him again. It was a post on Reddit that first caught my eye, buried deep in a thread about unexplained encounters. The user at Curious Clara had posted it under the title, "I think something's stealing my stuff and leaving things behind." Clara explained that she'd recently moved into an old Victorian house with creaky floors and narrow hallways. Her first few nights were quiet, save for the usual settling noises an old house makes. But after the first week, strange things began happening. It started small. One morning, her favorite mug was missing from the kitchen. She chalked it up to moving chaos and figured it would turn up eventually. But a few days later, more things began to vanish. Her keys, a photo frame, even her hairbrush. Each time something went missing, something unfamiliar took its place. A small wooden box appeared on the counter where her mug had been. A strange brass key replaced her photo frame on her nightstand. And the strangest of all, an old pocket watch was lying on her bathroom sink where her hairbrush should have been. Clara's post described how unsettled she felt by this. "It's like the house is trading with me," she wrote, "as if it decides what I should have." The comments filled with theories. Some users thought it might be a prank by a friend or family member. Others suggested a harmless spirit, but Clara seemed convinced it was something darker. Her story continued to evolve with each new update. In one post, she explained how she decided to set up a small camera in her living room, hoping to catch whatever or whoever was behind this. She posted the footage she captured on her profile, and the sight was eerie. The recording showed nothing unusual until around 3 a.m., when a faint, shadowy movement began near the edge of the frame. It was subtle, almost like the air itself was shimmering. And then, just as suddenly, a gloved hand appeared at the edge of the screen, reaching toward her coffee table, before the shadow vanished back into the darkness. Clara was horrified, but also intrigued. She became determined to figure out what was behind the strange exchanges. Over the next few nights, she stayed up, watching and waiting. She noticed that whatever entity was in her house only seemed to come when she was asleep. One night, Clara decided to leave a note on the kitchen counter. She wrote, "Who are you? What do you want?" and left it by a small trinket from her childhood, hoping to get a response. The following morning, her trinket was gone, replaced by an old faded photograph of a family she didn't recognize. On the back was a single word, scratched in jagged letters: lost. As she updated her Reddit thread, readers became increasingly invested in Clara's story. Many urged her to leave the house, while others suggested she call an expert on paranormal activity. But Clara refused. She felt a strange sense of responsibility, as if whatever was haunting her home had a story it needed to tell. She continued to leave notes, and each time, the entity would leave something behind: a rusted locket, an old doll, fragments of crumbling letters. Each item seemed to come from a different era, as if the house was collecting lost objects from people who had once lived there. And each item was accompanied by a cryptic word scratched into it: forgotten, remember, help. One night, Clara found herself drawn to the basement, a part of the house she'd always avoided. She took a flashlight and descended the creaking steps. The air was thick and musty, and the walls were lined with shelves of old, dust-covered boxes. At the far end of the room, her flashlight illuminated a strange locked cabinet. Inside, Clara found a small collection of objects, items she recognized as the ones that had been traded with her. But there was something else too. A worn notebook lay on the cabinet's top shelf, and as she opened it, she found pages filled with entries detailing the lives of people who had once lived in the house. Each entry was brief but haunting, describing people who had lost something dear to them: a child, a spouse, a precious heirloom. Each one had left something behind, something the house seemed to have collected over the years. In her final update, Clara wrote about one last discovery. The notebook's final page held an entry she hadn't noticed before, written in faded ink. It read, "The Collector of Lost Things." Beneath it was her name. "I don't know what it means," she wrote, her post trailing off in confusion. "But I don't think I'm alone here. I think it's waiting for me to give something back." Clara's Reddit account went silent after that. Her post remained, but she never updated the thread again. And though many Reddit users speculated about what had happened, no one ever found out the truth. Some say the collector found what it was looking for, and Clara became another part of its collection. A post caught my eye on a Reddit thread about strange encounters. The user, @EchoInTheDark, shared a chilling story about a night spent waiting at an old, nearly abandoned train station. The post was titled, "I think I took a train ride that wasn't meant for the living." It was eerie and detailed, and as I read through, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a ghost story. EchoInTheDark explained that they'd been traveling through a small town late at night. Their original train got delayed, so they ended up stranded at a tiny station around midnight. The place was silent, eerie, with dim lights flickering overhead and an unsettling emptiness. No employees in sight, no announcements, just a faint hum from the distant tracks. They were alone, or so they thought. The first strange thing happened when they sat down on a wooden bench in the waiting area. They noticed an old faded sign above that read, "The last train arrives at midnight." Oddly enough, their phone showed it was already past midnight. Confused, they thought the sign might be a relic from a different era, maybe a forgotten schedule. But as they waited, a faint sound of metal screeching against metal filled the air, distant yet unmistakable, the sound of a train approaching. They leaned forward, watching the tracks, when they saw an old-fashioned, dark-colored train pull into the station, its headlights casting an eerie glow. No one got off, and no conductor appeared to greet them. The doors creaked open slowly, invitingly, yet the train seemed wrong. The windows were pitch black, revealing no lights or passengers. Feeling a chill, Echo in the dark hesitated, but curiosity got the better of them. They took a deep breath and stepped on board. Inside, the air was thick and cold, and a musty smell filled the cabin, like the scent of dust and mold. The seats were old, their fabric torn, and the walls bore scratches, as if people had clawed at them in desperation. They sat down, gripping their bag tightly, hoping the train would soon reach a more populated station. But as the train began moving, they realized something strange. The windows showed nothing but darkness. No lights, no towns, no passing scenery, just an endless void. They checked their phone, hoping to find some sense of time, but it showed no signal, and, even stranger, the clock had stopped. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and an uneasy silence filled the car. Just when they thought they were the only passenger, they felt someone take a seat across the aisle. Startled, they looked up to see a figure shrouded in shadows, their face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The figure sat perfectly still, hands clasped in their lap, not moving, not breathing. Suddenly, a whisper echoed through the cabin, faint but unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here." Echo in the dark's heart pounded as they tried to stand, but the train seemed to pull them back down, the very air thickening around them. The figure across the aisle tilted their head slightly, and for the first time they saw its face, pale with hollow black eyes that seemed to stare straight into their soul. In a panic, they stumbled down the aisle, desperate to find an exit. But every door was locked tight, the windows unbreakable. As they moved further down the train, they noticed more passengers, each one as still and silent as the first. Their faces were all hollow, eyes empty, as if they were nothing but shells. Just when all hope seemed lost, a voice echoed over an intercom, though it sounded warped and ancient. "Last stop." The train slowed, and an echo in the dark rushed to the door, ready to leap out the moment it opened. As the doors creaked apart, they saw a platform just like the one they'd come from. But something felt wrong. The air was colder and a thick fog covered the ground. They stumbled out onto the platform, their bodies shaking. As the train pulled away, they saw the sign above the platform, the same as the one before. "The last train arrives at midnight." They checked their phone. No missed time, no missed calls. It was as if they had never boarded the train at all. But when they turned to leave the station, they froze. Hanging on the wall by the exit was an old sepia photograph of passengers from decades past. And there, standing among the shadowed figures, was a blurred image that looked exactly like them, staring back with wide, terrified eyes. At Echo in the Dark's post ended there, and they never updated the thread. Some people believed it was just a creepy story, but others couldn't shake the feeling that it was a warning. One commenter summed it up best: "Some trains aren't meant to be ridden, unless you're ready to become part of their journey forever." James had always been a night owl, so when he took a job as a night security guard at the old scrapyard on the edge of town, he thought it would be easy. The pay was decent, and his only task was to keep an eye out for intruders. But after a few shifts, he began to notice that the job wasn't quite as simple as it seemed. The scrapyard was enormous, a graveyard of twisted metal, rusted-out cars, and half-buried machinery, all piled high into strange, looming shapes. During the day, it looked like a junk pile. At night, under the cold glow of the moon, it felt more like a labyrinth, haunted and waiting. It began one night when James was making his rounds. He just passed by a line of rusted-out trucks when he heard something, a soft metallic scraping, like metal dragging against metal. He froze, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating piles of scrap that cast long, jagged shadows, but he saw nothing out of place. As he turned to continue his patrol, a loud clang echoed from the other side of the yard. Startled, he whipped around, shining his flashlight toward the sound. There, in the dim light, he saw a figure standing between two stacks of rusted cars. It was tall, far taller than any person, and thin, almost skeletal, wrapped in layers of ragged cloth that seemed to merge with the shadows. Its face was hidden, but he could feel it watching him. James's heart pounded as he took a step back, and as he did, the figure slipped behind the stacks and vanished. He tried to shake off the encounter, telling himself it was just a trick of the shadows, maybe a tarp caught in the wind. But each night, the encounters grew more intense. He'd find objects moved around, car doors swung open that had been closed moments before, stacks of metal parts shifted, forming shapes that looked almost like faces in the dark. One night, he found a row of mannequins near the main building. all of them staring in different directions. He didn't remember ever seeing them there before. But the strangest thing was that each mannequin's head had been turned to face him, hollow eyes watching his every step as he moved through the yard. James tried to report these strange happenings, but his boss brushed it off as night shift jitters. Determined to get proof, he brought a small camera with him and set it up at the edge of the yard, hoping to capture whatever was haunting him. Around midnight, as he was checking the far side of the yard, the faint sound of static came from his walkie-talkie. He picked it up, but all he heard was a strange muffled whisper, as if someone, or something, was trying to speak to him. Then he heard it. A soft, low voice, garbled but unmistakable, murmuring his name. Chilled to the bone, he backed away, tripping over a stack of old tires. When he glanced up, he saw it, the same tall figure he'd seen on his first night, only closer this time. Its face was still hidden, but as it moved, a long, skeletal hand reached out, brushing against the metal of an old car, leaving deep scratches in the rust. James bolted toward the guard shack, locking the door behind him. He looked out through the grimy window, scanning the yard. Everything was still, but when he turned to check the security monitors, he saw the figure again, standing directly in front of the camera he'd set up, its shadow stretching across the screen. The figure raised its head slowly, revealing a twisted, featureless mask where its face should have been. Then, as if sensing it was being watched, it turned its gaze directly into the camera. James felt an intense dread, a primal fear he couldn't explain. His hand shook as he reached for the door, his instinct to escape overpowering any thought of safety. In his final moments in the shack, he grabbed his phone, taking one last look at the security screen. But the figure was gone, as if it had vanished into thin air. The door to the guard shack creaked open behind him, though he hadn't unlocked it. Without looking back, James sprinted out of the scrapyard, leaving his post, his camera, and the haunted metal maze behind. He never returned, and when his boss tried to retrieve the footage from that night, he found only static, except for one frame, a single frozen image of a featureless mask staring straight into the lens, its hand reaching out, as if inviting the next soul into its dark kingdom of rust and shadows. The scrapyard is still there, still hiring night guards, but as far as James knows, none of them have stayed for very long. Maya and Sarah were best friends who shared a love for adventure. They'd grown up together in their small town, where excitement was rare, and the biggest thrill they could find was exploring old buildings or pulling harmless pranks. One night, after hearing rumors about their local mall being haunted, they hatched a plan. They would sneak into the mall just before closing and hide out until after it locked up for the night. It sounded harmless, just some late-night fun, a story to tell later. As the mall prepared to close, they slipped into a large department store, hid inside a dressing room, and waited. They giggled quietly, stifling their laughter when the store lights turned off one by one. Soon the mall was dark, empty, and entirely theirs. They emerged from their hiding spot, adrenaline buzzing in their veins. "This is amazing," Sarah whispered, her voice echoing softly. Maya grinned. "Let's explore." They walked through the empty corridors, marveling at how different everything looked at night. The once lively mall now felt like a deserted maze, the storefronts looming in shadow, and every sound magnified in the silence. But as they wandered, the thrill began to give way to an uneasy feeling, a sense that they were not truly alone. At first, it was just small, unsettling things. A mannequin that looked as if it had turned its head to watch them. A soft sound, like the whisper of footsteps, echoing from the shadows. They laughed nervously, convincing themselves it was just their imaginations. But then they noticed something that made their blood run cold. In the reflective glass of a jewelry store window, they saw another figure standing just a few feet behind them. Tall, shadowy, and still. They spun around, but the corridor was empty. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Maya nodded slowly. Let's just keep going. Maybe we're just spooking ourselves. They continued, but their nerves were frayed. The lights flickered every now and then, casting brief, eerie shadows, and strange sounds echoed from every corner. They heard soft laughter at one point, echoing faintly down the hall. And when they reached the food court, they were horrified to find that the tables and chairs had been rearranged into a perfect circle. Their stomachs twisted, but they were too far into the mall to find an exit quickly. As they tried to retrace their steps, they realized that every hallway looked the same. In the silence, they could hear faint whispers and the unmistakable sound of someone following them, the footsteps getting closer with each turn they took. Panicking, they broke into a run, racing down the corridors, trying every door they passed, but all were locked. Suddenly, Sarah tripped, and when Maya stopped to help her up, they both looked up to see something horrifying. A shadowy figure stood at the end of the hall, its face obscured, but they could see a twisted smile shining faintly in the darkness. "Come on," Maya whispered, pulling Sarah to her feet. They took off in the opposite direction, but every hallway seemed to lead them back to the food court. And there, standing around the circle of tables and chairs, were mannequins that hadn't been there before, positioned like an audience, all facing them, with their lifeless, glassy eyes fixed on the girls. They stumbled backward, too frightened to scream, when they heard a voice, cold, mocking, and seemingly all around them. "You shouldn't have stayed after dark." They turned, desperate to escape, and suddenly saw an exit door. Sprinting toward it, they pushed with all their strength, and it swung open, spilling them out into the empty parking lot. They ran until they reached Maya's car, not daring to look back. They jumped in, locked the doors, and sped away, never looking back at the mall as it loomed in their rearview mirror. The next day, they told their friends, but no one believed them. Rumors spread about the haunted mall, but whenever Maya and Sarah tried to tell their story, their voices would falter, haunted by the memory of that twisted smile and the whispers that still echoed in their minds. Days passed, but the events of that night continued to haunt Maya and Sarah. Every time one of them closed their eyes, they saw that twisted smile and the cold whispers that warned them not to stay after dark. They tried to brush it off, convincing themselves it was just their imagination playing tricks due to exhaustion. But something strange began to happen. Sarah started waking up every night at exactly 3 a.m. to the sound of faint whispers filling her room, as if they were coming from every direction. At first, she thought it was just dreams, but one morning, she discovered something terrifying. On her bedroom window, there were long, distorted finger marks, as if someone, or something, had tried to reach inside. As for Maya, she noticed something else. Every time she walked past the mall, her phone would ring strangely, but when she answered, no number would appear on the screen. All she could hear was a familiar voice whispering, "You haven't escaped yet." Both girls tried to go on with their lives, but the unsettling feeling wouldn't go away. The whispers grew louder, and the feeling of being watched became unbearable. Eventually, curiosity began to overpower their fear, and they made a decision. They would return to the mall. They needed answers, and they couldn't live with the constant dread anymore. One night, after hours, they snuck back into the mall, determined to face whatever was haunting them. The building was pitch black and silent, a place that no longer felt like the bustling mall they once knew. As they crept down the familiar corridors, everything seemed wrong. The air was thick, cold, and heavy with something they couldn't explain. They made their way to the food court, the spot where they had seen the mannequins standing in a circle. But when they arrived, they found the chairs and tables arranged exactly as they had been before, surrounding a large circle in the center. The chilling thing, however, was what lay in the middle, a picture of them, taken from behind, showing them running from the mall in the dead of night. Frozen, they stared at the photo, unable to comprehend how it was possible. It felt as if time had stopped, but then they heard it, a faint sound behind them, like a soft shuffle of footsteps. They slowly turned around. There it was, the figure. The same tall, shadowy figure they had seen before, standing at the edge of the circle with that grotesque, twisted smile on its face. It was grinning, its features distorted, as if the darkness itself was stretching to create this horrible, otherworldly being. And then, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once, it whispered, "I told you, never stay after dark." The smile grew wider, more unsettling, as if the creature had been waiting for them all along, anticipating their return. It took a step forward, and the air seemed to thicken with each movement. The girls turned and fled, but no matter how fast they ran, the walls of the mall seemed to stretch further, the exits disappearing, as if the mall itself was alive, trapping them inside. Eventually, they found themselves back at the food court, the mannequins still sitting in their circle, now staring directly at them, lifeless eyes glowing in the dim light. They could feel the presence of something, someone watching them, but when they turned to leave once more, the exit was finally in sight. But just before they could reach the door, they both heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing coming from behind them. They turned, but there was nothing there. The whispers followed them out, and as they reached the safety of their car, they glanced back at the darkened building, and for a moment, they thought they saw something moving behind the glass of the mall's entrance, a twisted, grinning figure, just waiting for them to return. As they drove away, they swore they'd never go back. But even after leaving, the whispers and the twisted smile followed them in their dreams, reminding them that the mall and the thing inside it was never truly gone. Carl was a long-haul truck driver, accustomed to the endless miles of highways stretching out before him. He'd seen it all: rainstorms, flat tires, tired eyes staring at the road, and the occasional rundown motel to rest for a few hours. But on this particular night, something felt off. It was late, the kind of late where the roads were empty, and only the hum of the truck's engine kept him company. He had just crossed into a remote stretch of highway when he saw the flickering neon sign of a motel. "The Quiet Rest," it read, glowing dimly in the night. Carl wasn't particularly picky when it came to motels. A bed, some food, and a few hours of sleep were all he needed to get back on the road. So, he pulled off and parked in the lot. The place was small, run down, but it would do. He walked up to the front door, the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel echoing in the still night. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and he was greeted by an older woman behind the counter, her face wrinkled with age but her eyes sharp. "Room for one?" she asked, her voice soft but raspy. Carl nodded. "Yeah, just for a few hours. Need to get some rest." She handed him a key without a word, her fingers brushing against his as she passed it to him. As he walked down the narrow hallway, he noticed something strange. The lights flickered briefly, casting odd shadows along the walls. He dismissed it as just old wiring, nothing unusual for a place like this. He reached his room, room 16, and inserted the key into the lock. The door creaked open, and he stepped inside. The room was small but decent enough. A single bed, a worn-out armchair, a dresser, and a flickering TV on the corner. The smell of stale air and old cleaning supplies lingered in the room. After a long day of driving, Carl collapsed onto the bed, immediately feeling the weight of exhaustion hit him. The last thing he remembered before drifting off to sleep was the sound of the wind howling outside, mixing with the occasional creak of the motel's old wooden frame. Carl was jolted awake in the middle of the night by the sound of muffled footsteps outside his door. He sat up, groggy, and listened carefully. The footsteps seemed to approach, then stop right outside his room. There was a soft knock. "Hello?" Carl called out, still half asleep. He wasn't expecting anyone. There was no response. The silence that followed was unsettling, so Carl swung his legs off the bed and stood up, his feet cold against the wooden floor. He approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole, but to his surprise, there was no one in the hallway. Frowning, he opened the door. The hallway was eerily quiet, the lights dimmed even further. The air felt heavier somehow, thick with an unsettling stillness. He stepped out and looked around, but no one was in sight. His gut twisted, but he shrugged it off. Maybe it was just his imagination or the late hour playing tricks on him. As he walked back to his room, he noticed that the door to room 15, just next door, was slightly ajar. He could have sworn it had been locked earlier. Curiosity gnawed at him, and despite his better judgment, Carl approached the door. He peered inside, expecting to find nothing more than an empty, dusty room. But what he saw inside made his heart skip a beat. The room was empty, but the bed had clearly been slept in, sheets tangled, a faint indentation where someone had laid their head. On the nightstand, a small, crumpled piece of paper lay, as though it had been hastily discarded. Carl hesitated for a moment before picking it up. The writing on the note was messy, rushed but legible. "Don't go into room 16, she's waiting for you." Carl felt a chill run down his spine. He froze, staring at the note in disbelief. What did it mean? Who was waiting for him? Was it some sort of prank? The longer he stood there, the more the air seemed to thicken around him, as if something unseen was watching him. He quickly turned and walked back to his room, his mind racing. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but Carl couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When he woke up the next morning, the motel looked exactly the same. The same peeling paint on the walls, the same dimly lit hallway, and the same quiet, eerie stillness. As Carl packed his things and prepared to leave, he noticed the woman at the front desk again. This time she was staring at him with an almost vacant expression, her eyes narrowed in something between recognition and warning. She didn't say a word as he approached the counter to check out. "Thanks for the stay," Carl muttered, trying to ignore the unease that gripped his chest. She simply nodded, her gaze following him as he turned to leave. Just as he reached the door, he heard her voice, soft and trembling. "Room 16. No one stays there for long." Carl's stomach dropped. He turned back to her, but she was already looking away, her expression unreadable. It was then that he realized something that made his heart race. The woman's name tag read Marie, the same name he had seen on the crumpled note. As Carl drove away from the motel, he couldn't help but glance in his rearview mirror. The motel was still there, standing in the middle of nowhere, just as it had before. But as he drove farther down the road, he felt an overwhelming urge to look back one last time. In the distance, the lights of the motel flickered once more, and for a brief moment, Carl thought he saw someone standing in the window of room 16, a pale figure staring at him with hollow eyes. He quickly turned his gaze back to the road, pressing the accelerator harder. But deep down, Carl knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened in that motel was not over, and room 16 would forever be a mystery he could never escape. Alex had always been a cautious driver, but sometimes fate has its own plans. It was a stormy evening when he found himself on the road, trying to make it home after a long day. The rain came down in sheets, heavy and unrelenting, turning the road slick and dangerous. He was just a few miles from his destination when the car in front of him suddenly swerved. He slammed on his brakes, but it was too late. The world spun out of control as his car collided with the guardrail, sending him careening off the road and into the trees. The last thing Alex remembered before everything went black was the screech of metal against metal, the airbag exploding in his face, and then nothing. When Alex opened his eyes again, the first thing he noticed was the overwhelming silence. His body ached all over, and his head throbbed painfully. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, as though they were trapped beneath something. His vision was blurry at first, but it slowly started to clear. He was in a hospital room, sterile, white and quiet, except for the faint hum of machines. His fingers tingled as he slowly reached up to touch his forehead, where a bandage was wrapped tightly. He tried to sit up but was overcome by a wave of dizziness, so he laid back down. The beeping of a heart monitor was the only sound in the room, but something didn't feel right. Through the small window in the door, Alex saw that the rain was still falling, pouring down in torrents. It was the middle of the night. The quiet in the hospital was unnerving, too quiet. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 2:37 a.m. Suddenly, a soft click echoed in the room, and the door creaked open. Alex turned his head and saw a nurse standing in the doorway. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back into a tight bun, wearing a white uniform. Her face was expressionless, her eyes dull. "You're awake," she said in a monotone voice, walking over to his bed. Alex tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and no words came out. The nurse noticed his discomfort and quickly handed him a cup of water. As he drank, he watched her. There was something off about her, something cold and uninviting. "Where am I?" Alex managed to croak. "You're in the hospital," she replied flatly. "You were in an accident." Alex nodded, but his mind was racing. He tried to remember the crash, the sound of his car hitting the guardrail, but it was all a blur. He remembered the rain, the screeching tires, and then nothing. His memory was clouded, like a fog he couldn't push through. The nurse checked his IV and adjusted some of the machines, never once looking him in the eye. It was as if she was detached, robotic even. Alex had the unsettling feeling that she wasn't truly there, or at least not like the other nurses he had seen before. "Rest now," she said. "We'll take care of you." With that, she turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind her. Alex lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange sense of isolation wash over him. The room seemed colder now, darker somehow, as if the shadows were growing longer in the corners. He tried to close his eyes and sleep, but the sound of dripping water filled the room, like a slow, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from somewhere nearby, but he couldn't tell where. Every time the sound echoed in his ears, his anxiety grew. The rain outside seemed to be intensifying, and the sound of it blended with the tapping, creating an eerie, unsettling atmosphere. Just as he was about to drift off, the door creaked open again. This time there was no nurse, no one he recognized, just a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. Alex blinked, trying to make sense of it. The figure was tall, draped in a dark cloak, with a hood that obscured most of its face. It stepped forward, and the door slammed shut behind it. Alex's heart raced. He could feel a chill running through the room as the figure approached his bed. There was something unnatural about the way it moved, almost gliding across the floor, its footsteps barely audible. The tapping sound grew louder as if it was drawing closer, matching the rhythm of the figure's steps. Who are you?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it reached out, its hand cold and skeletal, and gently touched his forehead. The moment it made contact, a wave of icy dread washed over Alex. His vision blurred, and he felt as though he was being pulled into a different world, a place darker than the night outside. The shadows in the room seemed to grow and twist, swirling around him like a storm. His body stiffened, paralyzed by fear, as the figure leaned in closer, its breath cold against his skin. And then, just before Alex could scream, the figure spoke in a voice that sounded like 1,000 whispers in the wind. "You didn't make it." Suddenly the room went silent, the shadows receded, and the figure vanished. Alex gasped, sitting up in a panic, his heart pounding in his chest. The hospital room was now empty again, the machine still beeping rhythmically, the rain still pouring outside. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The door opened once more, and this time a different nurse entered, her face kind and gentle. "How are you feeling?" she asked, offering him a warm smile. Alex looked at her, his mind racing. Was anyone else here? A man in a cloak? The nurse frowned slightly, her smile fading. "Number, there's no one else. You've been alone here all night, Mr. Harris." Alex stared at her, confused. He tried to shake off the feeling that he was losing his grip on reality. Maybe it was the painkillers. Maybe it was the trauma from the crash. But deep down, a chilling thought crossed his mind. Something more sinister had happened to him. He wasn't sure if he was still alive. That night, the storm raged on, and the tapping continued. The longer he stayed in the hospital, the more the strange occurrences haunted him. The shadowy figure, the chilling voice, and the unsettling feeling that perhaps he wasn't meant to wake up at all. A few months ago, I stumbled upon a Reddit thread called "Your Secrets Will Be Exposed." The title was strange, but curiosity got the best of me. The post itself was brief, just a single sentence. Type yes, and I'll reveal something about you. Most of the comments were people joking around, saying things like, "Yeah, sure, tell me my life secrets." Against my better judgment, I typed yes and hit send, expecting nothing. A few seconds later, I got a notification. It was a reply to my comment from a user named u/truthseeker99. You think nobody knows, but I do. October 12th, the park bench by the lake. My heart skipped a beat. October 12th? That was a specific day, a day I'd never told anyone about. That night I'd been alone at the park by the lake, reflecting on things I hadn't shared with anyone. It was a private moment, a memory I hadn't even talked about with my closest friends. I refreshed the page, hoping the comment would disappear, that maybe I'd imagined it, but it was still there, staring at me like a secret exposed. I replied, asking them how they knew. Almost immediately, they responded, "There are no secrets online. Everything leaves a trace." That was the end of it for that night. I closed Reddit, trying to tell myself it was just a coincidence. I didn't know how, but I convinced myself it wasn't real, just some kind of joke. But the next day I received another notification from the same user. "Do you remember the red scarf?" I froze. I knew exactly what they were talking about. The red scarf was something I'd lost in high school, something that had belonged to my late grandmother. It had disappeared during a snowy winter day, and I'd been devastated, searching everywhere without success. I'd never told anyone about how much it hurt me to lose it. Now, I was genuinely spooked. I went to u/truthseeker99's profile, hoping to find clues about who they were. But the account was practically empty. No posts, no comments outside of this one thread. I tried to ignore it, but the messages continued. Every few days they'd leave comments with details that no one could possibly know. They mentioned my favorite songs, obscure ones I'd never talked about online. They'd bring up my childhood fears, like my fear of deep water and my phobia of old, creaky staircases. It was as if they could read my thoughts, pulling memories from the depths of my mind that even I rarely visited. One night, the messages took a darker turn. I was up late, scrolling aimlessly, when a new notification popped up. "Be careful who you let in. Not everyone has good intentions." Chills ran down my spine. I felt like I was being watched, like the walls of my apartment were closing in. I double-checked all the doors and windows, making sure they were locked. I told myself it was just paranoia, a product of my overactive imagination. But then, that night, something happened. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a message from an unknown number. "Check your front door." I sat up, heart racing. The message didn't come from Reddit, but from an actual phone number. Against every rational instinct, I got out of bed and crept to the front door, peeking through the peephole. Outside, the hallway was empty, but on the floor in front of my door was a single folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I picked it up and unfolded it. Inside was a handwritten note. Not everything should be shared. I went back inside, bolting the door behind me. I barely slept that night, every creak and groan of my apartment making me jump. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Someone on Reddit is sending me creepy messages? It felt absurd, like something out of a horror movie. The messages from u/truthseeker99 continued, each one more personal, more invasive. They mentioned details about my daily routine, what time I left for work, what coffee shop I liked, the exact route I took home. They even described the clothes I wore on certain days. Then, one night, the messages stopped altogether. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt a strange, unsettling silence, as if something was waiting in the shadows, watching. A few weeks passed. And just as I was beginning to feel like things were normal again, I received one final message. This time, it wasn't a comment on Reddit or a text. It was a single email from an address I didn't recognize. Your secrets are safe, for now. After that, there were no more messages. I deleted my Reddit account, threw away my phone, and even moved to a new apartment in a different city. I hoped that by erasing all traces, I could leave this nightmare behind. But every so often, I'll catch a glimpse of something, a figure in my peripheral vision, a shadow on the wall, and feel that familiar chill. Like someone's watching, waiting. I don't know who you/truthseeker99 was, or how they knew so much about me. And maybe I don't want to know. Working the night shift at a gas station might sound boring to most, but to me, it was the perfect job. I didn't mind the quiet, and the extra pay for covering the late hours didn't hurt. Most nights I'd spend the hours alone, scrolling through my phone, sipping lukewarm coffee, and occasionally filling up the tanks for the rare customer. Station 14 was on the outskirts of town, surrounded by miles of empty road and open fields. It was the kind of place that felt completely cut off from the world after midnight. But, as I quickly learned, Station 14 was anything but boring. My first strange experience happened only a few weeks after I started. It was around 2 a.m., the time when the world feels emptiest. I was sweeping the floor near the entrance when I saw someone standing just outside, staring through the glass door. I hadn't heard a car pull up, and the security cameras showed nothing but an empty lot. The man wore a long dark coat and had his hood up, obscuring his face. He didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared at me through the glass, like he was waiting for something. I felt a chill run down my spine. My hand hovered over the door lock, but something held me back. Instead, I tried to wave at him, hoping he would react, maybe even leave. But he didn't. He just kept standing there, motionless. I turned away for just a second to grab my phone, but when I looked back, he was gone. There was no sign of him outside. No footprints, no car sounds, nothing. I chalked it up to sleep deprivation or a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew it wasn't either. A few nights later, I was in the middle of refilling the chip racks when I heard it, the faint sound of tapping, coming from the back of the store. At first I thought it was the wind, but the taps had a rhythm to them, too precise to be random. I followed the sound to the storage room. I'd always hated that room. It was cramped, cold, and smelled faintly of mildew. As I stood outside the door, the tapping stopped. I hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob, and then I heard it again, a soft, low whisper coming from inside. "Come in." Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see what was inside. I took a deep breath, twisted the doorknob, and stepped into the darkness. The room was empty. But just as I was about to turn around, the door slammed shut behind me. I lunged at the doorknob, trying to wrench it open, but it wouldn't budge. Panic rose in my chest as I banged on the door, shouting for help. After what felt like an eternity, the door suddenly swung open on its own, and I stumbled out, gasping for breath. No one was there. The station was silent. The tapping and whispering had vanished. I took the rest of the night on edge, jumping at every little sound. The encounters became more frequent after that. It started with small things, items moving on their own, the lights flickering, or hearing faint footsteps when I knew I was alone. I tried to brush it off as exhaustion, but the occurrences were too real to ignore. One night, around 3 a.m., I was filling the coffee machine when I saw something in the reflection of the glass door. A figure stood behind me, just out of reach, watching me. My heart skipped a beat. I whipped around, but the aisle was empty. The next night, I decided to call the manager. I tried to explain everything. The man outside, the tapping, the whispering. But she just laughed, telling me I was imagining things. "There's nothing wrong with that station," she said dismissively. "You're just not used to the night shift." Frustrated but determined, I went back to work, telling myself it was all in my head. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right with Station 14. Then, about a month into the job, things escalated. It was another quiet night, and I was in the middle of restocking the shelves when I heard the sound of footsteps, heavy and slow, coming from the back of the store. I froze, heart pounding, straining to hear. The footsteps were getting closer, moving up the aisle, one deliberate step at a time. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. The footsteps stopped. I waited, holding my breath, but there was only silence. Then, without warning, the power went out. The store was plunged into darkness, and the only light came from the faint glow of the emergency exit sign near the back door. I pulled out my phone, turning on the flashlight, and began to make my way to the breaker room. As I walked, I heard something behind me, a faint whisper, too soft to make out, but unmistakably there. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. I hope you found some peace and comfort. Before you drift off completely, let me know in the comments what time it is, where you are, and which country you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Until next time, rest well and sweet dreams.